Let's face it, dolls are creepy. Unless you're a serial killer, you probably wouldn't want to spend a night in a room full of porcelain faces and beady little eyes watching you. And no doll is creepier than Chucky, the murderous plaything with a body count higher than some small wars. Almost everyone knows the iconic red-headed terror by name and looks alone. But how many of you know who this freaky doll really is? Sit tight, keep an eye on your toys. This is Chucky 101. Before he became a demonic, possessed good guy doll, Chucky was actually a flesh and blood serial killer named Charles Lee Ray, also known as the Lakeshore Strangler. Ray murdered a number of innocents in the south side of Chicago, including children, and even stabbed a pregnant woman in the stomach. While fleeing from that final crime, he was abandoned by his getaway driver Eddie Caputo. Ray was then chased down by Detective Mike Norris, who'd been pursuing him for years for his bloody crimes. The two engaged in a tense firefight in the streets of downtown Chicago. It was a close call, but Norris was able to finally get the jump on Ray and fatally shot him inside a toy store. However, before Ray died, he used a voodoo incantation learned from his mystical accomplice to reincarnate his soul into a nearby doll. This red-haired, overalls-wearing little fella would continue to be the vessel for Chucky's soul for the rest of his undead existence. This toy then ended up in the hands of a 6-year-old Andy Barclay, who learned Chucky's true name. This bound the two of them together, as Chucky, who's forever in want of a human vessel, can only usurp the body of the first person to learn his name. Over the course of his time with Andy and his mother, Chucky in his new doll body tracked down and murdered all of his former associates, like his flaky getaway driver and his no longer useful voodoo instructor. As his doll body slowly became more mortal and therefore inched closer to being a permanent residence for his soul, Chucky urgently attempted to usurp Andy's body. However, he didn't count on Andy, Andy's mother, and Detective Norris turning the tables on him. Chucky was burned alive and shot to death, freeing Andy from the pint-sized menace. Or so they thought. Turns out you can't just keep a good guy doll down, and 2 years after the incident with the Barclays, the Play Pals company responsible for producing the good guy dolls from which Chucky gets his body resumed production on a new batch of the cursed playthings. Components of the original Chucky doll got mixed in at the factory, causing the 3-foot menace to rise again. He murdered the corporate assistant sent to dispose of him, then hijacked a nearby car, killed the driver, and rode into the city. And just like that, the world's most dangerous doll was back in action. Chucky only wanted 2 things: to get a human body again and to murder anyone who so much as looked at him funny in the process. Andy had been placed into a foster home with Kyle, his new big sister, since the incident. His biological mother was deemed unfit to raise him after being found ranting and raving about killer dolls. This new household was then infiltrated by Chucky, who replaced a more benign good guy doll and waited for his chance to strike. In the process of stalking Andy, Chucky managed to murder his teacher, both his foster parents, and several other innocent bystanders. Things then came to a head when Chucky chased Andy and Kyle to the good guy doll factory, where they engaged in a battle to the death, or in Chucky's case, undeath. He attempted to perform his soul-transferring ritual on Andy, but found he'd waited too long and that his soul was trapped in his tiny plastic body for good. Enraged by this development, he tried to kill both of them, but got burnt, melted, and dismembered in the process. Andy and Kyle once again struck the killing blow, this time by forcing a pressurized air hose into Chucky's mouth, causing his head to inflate and explode. Talk about a run of bad luck, Chuck. Well, not quite. The thing you need to understand about this devilish doll is that what he may just lack in height, he makes up for in determination. And when it comes to Chucky, death just doesn't seem to stick. That's why when his blood dripped over into the vat of molten plastic used to make more good guy dolls, the nightmare started all over again. This time, he even brutally murdered the CEO of the Play Pals company with a selection of his company's own toys. Hungry for vengeance, Chucky mailed himself to Kent Military Academy, the current residence of, you guessed it, Andy Barclay. By this time, however, Chucky's new body was first discovered by a younger recruit at the academy, Ronald Tyler. Chucky revealed his true name to the naive little cadet and began making preparations to turn this kid into his newest earthly vessel. Andy, however, was wise to Chucky's plot and began a series of cat-and-mouse games that left a number of people at the military academy dead. After essentially causing mass murder by replacing non-lethal paint rounds with live rounds at the Academy's annual war games, Chucky fled to a nearby carnival with Ronald to complete his soul-transferring ritual. However, Andy and his surviving allies managed to chase the malicious chunk of plastic down and put a stop to his brutality yet again, this time by first slicing off half his face, then throwing his body into a large industrial fan, effectively blending the little creep. Surely that should be the end of him, right? Who could survive being cut into 1,000 itty-bitty shitty pieces. If you look down and check the runtime of this video, you already know this childhood terror isn't over, though Chucky is at least done with Andy for now. He came back from the dead with the help of his murderous admirer Tiffany Valentine after she stole his mutilated parts from an evidence locker and killed a guard in the process. She rebuilt Chucky and brought him back to life with another voodoo incantation. Now he looks less like a standard doll and more like a gross, stitched-together mess. And how did Chucky thank her for giving him the gift of life? By murdering her, of course. He then transferred her soul into another doll to give himself a matching doll bride. After discovering two teenage lovebirds, Jesse and Jade, who would make perfect human vessels for both their rotten souls, they set out on a journey to isolate them and possess them. Naturally, in the process, they murdered a hell of a lot of people, doing everything from sticking a cop's face full of nails to slicing up a sleeping couple with falling glass. In the course of their murder spree, the twisted pair even fell in love and, well, we'll leave the rest to your imagination. We don't want to lose any monetization on this one. Anyway, in order to transfer their souls into the bodies of Jesse and Jade, they needed to first obtain a mystical amulet that was buried with Charles Lee Ray's body. After luring their victims to the gravesite and preparing to perform the ritual, Tiffany had a change of heart and decided that both she and Chucky were better off dead. And frankly, considering how many people they'd killed, it's hard to argue against that. Tiffany stabbed Chucky before dying herself. Jade and Jesse then finished Chucky off by shooting him dead. By this time, he at least left a twisted living legacy as Tiffany gave birth to a demented doll child. And it all gets crazier from there. Oh, you thought it was pretty horrifying already? You have no idea. While Chucky and Tiffany were killed, it wasn't for long. Their doll offspring, who goes alternatingly by Glenn and Glenda, managed to find and resurrect them. Chucky, now with the whole murderous doll family in tow, set his sights on actress Jennifer Tilly and rapper Redman as new vessels for their souls. However, trouble was brewing right under his plastic little nose, as his wife and child were beginning to develop doubts about their murderous lifestyle. Chucky, however, still got his way. After murdering a number of actors and journalists and production staff in Hollywood, he finally managed to get his tiny hands on Tilly and Redman. Though, while attempting to perform the ritual, Chucky decided that he might actually prefer living as a killer doll, seeing as he never ages, it's a heck of a lot harder to kill, and is practically below suspicion for his murders. While Tiffany's soul is successfully transferred to the body of Jennifer Tilly, Chucky's child turns against him, hacking him to pieces with an axe and sending him on an express trip to hell once again. But even that wouldn't be Chucky's last hurrah. He'd return nastier than ever 9 years later. This time, he'd patch things up with Tiffany, still taking advantage of her new human form, as well as patching up his nightmarish face. With Tiffany's help, he mailed himself to the home of a paraplegic woman named Nika Pierce and her family, and after murdering Nika's mother, Sarah, and making it look like a suicide, he managed to score himself an even bigger selection of victims as Nika's sympathetic extended family piled into the home, including her young niece Alice, who took a real interest in Chucky. Over the course of the night, Chucky killed his way through almost everyone in the house like a classic Agatha Christie whodunit, some with details so violent and gruesome we couldn't even tell you about them here. He kept Alice tied up and hidden in the closet throughout, hoping to use her as a vessel once everyone else was dead. Nika, however, put up way more of a fight than he was anticipating, managing to give this experienced killer a real run for his money. Why was Chucky even so interested in this family in the first place? Because they were his final victims as human serial killer Charles Lee Ray. It was him stabbing Nika's pregnant mother through the stomach that caused her paralysis in the first place. Nika did, however, manage to survive her Chucky ordeal, though this came as a price as she was framed for Chucky's murders and sent to an insane asylum for her trouble. Chucky was liberated from his new home in the police evidence locker by Tiffany, who once again helped him mail himself to another victim, the now adult Andy Barclay. Chucky wanted to settle an old score, but Andy was prepared and immediately blew Chucky's head off with a shotgun. He kept Chucky's still living severed head and proceeded to torture it for 4 years in revenge for his countless horrible crimes. However, this time, Chucky had a frightening new trick up his sleeve. He discovered a voodoo incantation that allowed him to split his soul and inhabit multiple vessels at once, essentially giving him the ability to create an entire army of himself. Tiffany helped deliver another Chucky-possessed good guy doll to the mental hospital where Nika Pierce, the other one who got away, was being treated. In his new demented playground, Chucky began tormenting Nika and killing off both patients and staff. With Tiffany's help, he was able to sneak in even more dolls to the asylum, creating an entire squad of nasty little Chuckies. Andy, realizing Chucky's sinister plans, got himself committed to the hospital in hopes of thwarting them, but he was too late, as the small army of Chucky dolls managed to overpower and possess Nika, trap Andy, and finally escape. The result? There's now a whole bunch of Chuckies running around out there, some in the form of not-so-good guy dolls and others hidden in human bodies. None of them play safe with others, so you better watch your back if they end up anywhere near you. Now, check out Chucky vs. Annabelle. Who will win? And you versus Annabelle, how can you defeat and survive it? For more delightful facts about devilish dolls.